So, you got the Easter egg hunts, the pastel colors, maybe even a visit from a fluffy bunny. But did you know that underneath all of that, Easter holds a powerful story that spans centuries and cultures? And today, we're going to peel back all the layers to see how some pagan traditions and the central core Christian belief have brought us to the Easter that we celebrate now today, and what it all truly is about. But before we get to any of that, make sure to subscribe to this channel, as we have a lot of amazing content that's going to be coming your way in the next several weeks and months, and you're not going to want to miss a single one of those videos. Now, let's get talking about Easter. We're going to start out by looking at the pagan origins of Easter. Many pagan cultures across Europe and the Near East celebrated the arrival of spring with festivals focused on themes of renewal, rebirth, fertility, and the lengthening of the days after winter. Now, these types of celebrations make a lot of sense, as in the spring, most animals in these regions start to reproduce, because after the winter months, new plants begin to grow, as crops are planted, and the previous vegetation starts to bloom again. It is the best time for these animals to reproduce, as resources are on the incline, there are milder temperatures, and longer daylight hours. These spring festivals would normally occur near the vernal equinox, which marks the beginning of spring, and it takes place on March 20th. In other cultures in the Near East, it marks the start of their new year. Because many of these festivals dealt with renewal, rebirth, and fertility, some of the symbols that were associated with them were eggs, which is a universal symbol for fertility and new life, and rabbits, which are associated with fertility as well. Now, there were some cultures that had fertility gods that they worshiped during these spring festivals, but that wasn't the case for all the pagan cultures. Now, for the Christian origins of Easter, we have to go all the way back to the early church. Each spring, the early church, after the resurrection of Jesus, would have a time that they would spend commemorating Jesus' death and resurrection as part of their regular worship. This would take place near the time of the Jewish Passover, as the crucifixion and resurrection both took place during the Jewish Passover time, as the Last Supper that Jesus shared with his disciples was the day of the Passover meal and celebration. By the 2nd century, a distinct annual celebration of Easter emerged, and at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the council standardized the date of Easter to be the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after the vernal equinox. Now, this was to make sure that it was different from the Jewish Passover, but still related to the spring season. There are many traditions that have emerged in this celebration of Easter in Christianity. Lent is a time of fasting and prayer that lasts 40 days prior to Easter. We looked at this a lot more in depth in last week's video, and I encourage you to check it out. There is also the celebration of Holy Week. This is the week leading up to Easter that includes Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday. And if you want to know more about these celebrations, make sure to come back next week, as we're going to take a much deeper look at each of these celebrations during the Holy Week. The celebration concludes with an Easter Sunday service celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. Now, you must be asking yourself, how did these two celebrations come to be celebrated on the same day? Well, that has to do with that pesky little Easter bunny. This fellow's origin story goes all the way back to the 17th century Germany, and maybe even a little bit earlier than that. The earliest mention of the Easter bunny, or the Easter Hare as it's more accurately translated, dates back to 1682 in a doctoral dissertation by George Frank von Frankenau in Germany. Some think that the Easter bunny was tied to a Germanic goddess, but that really is debated, and there's not a whole lot of substantial proof of that. Depending on the region that some people lived in, they had a fox, a stork, or even a cuckoo bird before the hare became the most dominant figure in this folklore. The lore behind the Easter bunny was that it would lay eggs and hide them in gardens, so kids would build nests for the Easter bunny to come and lay its eggs in. These nests were traditionally made out of hats and bonnets. Then, in the 18th century, when many German families were migrating over to America, they brought the tradition of the Easter bunny with them. In early folklore, the Easter bunny sometimes played a role very similar to Santa Claus. They would judge whether the children had been good or whether they have been bad, where the well-behaved children were rewarded with colorful eggs. But if they made nests for the Easter bunny, where did the Easter baskets come from that we use today? This actually comes from a Christian tradition that dates back all the way to the Middle Ages. Leading up to Easter, people would bring baskets of food that were mainly the foods that they had been fasting from during the Lenten season. They would bring these baskets on Easter Sunday for the priest to bless them. Now, it was during the 19th century that these two traditions of bringing these baskets of food for Easter and the Easter bunny bringing eggs to nests started to merge. It was during the 19th century as well that we saw the rise of confectionery industry and chocolate making. Soon after led to the emergence of chocolate eggs, and over time, more and more people started to place the baskets of food with filling them with chocolate eggs for kids. Over time, these Easter bunny traditions expanded and grew to things like decorating eggs. Because of this, the two Easter traditions of the Christian tradition of celebrating the resurrection of Jesus and that of the Easter bunny began to merge, with both of them being celebrated on the same date. Is there anything wrong with the Easter bunny tradition? No, not really. And some churchgoers have tried to tie some of the symbolism of the Easter bunny tradition with the Christian Easter tradition, like the meaning of the eggs being a symbol of an empty tomb. Some believe this is taking things a bit too far and merging these two very different traditions that take place on the same day. Though they may be celebrated on the same day, the true origin of Easter is rooted in the Christian tradition. Some parts may have been conflated over time, but Easter has always been a religious holiday and a core Christian belief and celebration. Now, is it wrong to participate in the Easter bunny tradition? No, it really isn't. But we must not lose focus on what Easter is really about. It's the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is through this moment that hope was given to all of humanity and an opportunity was there for us to become a new creation in Jesus. But we're going to be talking about that a little bit more in 2 weeks when we have a video that's more in depth covering the death and resurrection of Jesus and what it really means. Now, if you enjoyed this video and learned something new today, make sure to give it a like and let us know down in the comments what you learned that was new. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the amazing content that we got coming your way. May each and every one of you know, understand, and remember what Jesus did for you and all of us on the cross and in his resurrection. May God bless each and every one of you.